In this program, we'll be looking at three aspects of energy: the biological energy of cells, the production of electricity, and the use of a new fuel, liquid hydrogen. Energy. But what is energy? We talk of a marathon runner's energy, of the energy you get from a chocolate bar, of new energies. We often tend to consider energy and matter as opposites. Matter being what you can see, touch, has weight, occupies space, and energy being something that puts matter into movement. Of course, energy is what enables work to be done, such as the effort you exert to move an object. But it's also necessary for a flower to open, or for a star to be born. And energy is also what links together the particles that make up matter. In other words, energy comes in many forms. There are two forms of energy that are particularly important to us: radiant energy, that is to say light, and chemical energy. On Earth, energy is continually being transformed into another energy. But the connection between light energy and chemical energy is somewhat special, because it is at the origin of life. The sun is the biggest energy station in the universe. Every second, huge quantities of its energy reach our planet as ultraviolet rays, visible light, heat and radio waves. Most of this energy heats the atmosphere, the ground and oceans, nourishing the cycle of water evaporation and precipitation, and generating winds and sea currents. The sun is also indispensable to life. Like a gigantic battery, it energizes all living things. However, living organisms cannot use solar energy directly. First, it has to be stored in chemical compounds. This major function is carried out by green plants through the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis originates within the very hearts of plant cells, in tiny workshops called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, a green pigment that traps and amplifies solar energy. Thanks to this energy, the air and carbon dioxide molecules assemble to form oxygen and glucose, a sugar. The glucose will be transformed into other compounds which serve to build all the tissues and organs of the plant, as well as to maintain its vital processes. Chlorophyll plants are said to be autotrophic, as they are capable of manufacturing their own food. The oldest organisms are microscopic autotrophs that inhabited the primitive seas 3 billion years ago. During their evolution, the plants developed various organs to trap solar energy. The leaf is the most evolved of all such organs. In a mere hour, when the sun is out, a square meter of leaves produces from 1/2 to 1 gram of sugar. The surface of the leaves of a single bush can cover 100 square meters and produce almost 1/2 ton of sugar per year. The plant consumes the sugar to keep alive and grow. The many shapes and sizes of leaves denote the specific energy requirements of various species of plants. By trapping the sunlight over millions of years, autotrophic plants colonize the Earth's oceans and surfaces, making up a vast reservoir of usable energy and producing the atmosphere's oxygen. This energy and oxygen enabled a new group of organisms to appear on the planet, obtaining its energy supplies in a totally different manner. These organisms include bacteria and plants without chlorophyll, such as mushrooms, also animals and human beings. All these organisms are called heterotrophic because they obtain the energy they need by nourishing themselves with other living organisms. In the cells of all heterotrophs are small energy stations, the mitochondria. Molecules rich in energy from foods, such as glucose, are forwarded to the mitochondria with any oxygen absorbed in respiration. There, the glucose is burned in the presence of oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. This reaction, similar to fuel combustion in a car's engine, releases energy. Part of the energy is used immediately to produce substances needed by the organism. The major part, however, is stored inside a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. In a way, the ATP is a reservoir of energy, ready to be used. It satisfies all the energy requirements of the organism: the emission of heat, transportation of substances inside the organism, movement. The production of light, whether in luminescent organisms such as the firefly, or like the electric current in neurons of our brain, depends on the energy stored in the ATP. When a person moves, for instance, and breathes faster, large amounts of ATP are produced. The molecule gradually triggers the muscular contractions. During this process, part of the energy of food is lost, mostly in the form of heat. In man, these losses can be as high as 75%, while only 25% of the energy absorbed is likely to be used. Similarly, plants only manage to transform 1 to 2% of the energy they receive into chemical compounds. The process of photosynthesis only uses 1/4% of the solar energy that reaches the Earth. All the planet's living beings depend greatly on each other to fulfill their energy needs. Plants provide the glucose and oxygen necessary for animals. The animals in turn emit the carbon dioxide plants require to produce the organic compounds they need. The human species is an integral part of that cycle, energized by the sun. Over the centuries, the chemical energy contained in organic matter, plant and animal, formed the fossil energies we know as coal, petroleum, and natural gas. These resources have become so valuable that petroleum has been baptized black gold. But the writing is on the wall. It will soon be exhausted and is not renewable. Fortunately, such is not the case for another form of energy: hydroelectricity. Electricity is the handiest and most flexible of all forms of energy. It's easily produced and is transmitted and distributed without too much loss. It is without a doubt a tremendous technological success. To think that in the 18th century, electricity was believed to be a fluid, and that's why the expression electric current was coined. Today we know a great deal more about electricity, but still, for me, mere mortal that I am, it remains somewhat of a mystery. It's not possible to imagine modern life without electricity. It takes an occasional power failure for us to realize how much we have come to depend on this form of energy. But do we know exactly what electricity is? Electricity originates in the very heart of matter. All matter is composed of atoms. Each atom is itself composed of a nucleus surrounded by electrons. The electrons swirl around the nucleus in a perpetual dance, a little like the planets around the sun. Normally, the electrons are closely linked to the atom's nucleus and don't stray from it. However, some electrons can be pulled away from the atomic nuclei. When you rub glass and silk together, for example, a certain number of electrons are pulled away from the glass's atoms and cling to the silk's atoms. The silk, with a surplus of electrons, becomes the carrier of a negative electric charge. The glass, deprived of electrons, acquires an opposite electric charge called positive. The electric charges thus created can attract tiny objects. If the silk is put back into contact with the glass, The electrons return to their previous respective positions, and the electric charges are nullified. It's what we call static electricity. Lightning flashing through a stormy sky is one of its more spectacular manifestations. During a thunderstorm, a substantial negative charge accumulates in clouds as a result of temperature and wind variations. On the other hand, the ground develops a heavy positive charge. When the imbalance between the two becomes excessive, a series of violent discharges are produced, accompanied by light and heat emissions. The lightning thus neutralizes the electric charges. Static electricity is not easily exploited. Over the centuries, scientists have discovered an effective way of taming electrons and harnessing their energy: the electric current. In certain materials, metals especially, electrons happen to be weakly attached to the atomic nuclei and can be very mobile. They can be made to move in a predetermined direction. Such materials are called conductors, and the movement of electrons in conductive materials is called electric current. An electric current can be obtained by connecting a copper wire to the terminals of a battery. This causes chemical reactions to occur in the battery. Electrons are continuously removed from the battery's positive terminal and released at the negative terminal. These electrons penetrate the end of the wire. Their movement is almost immediately communicated to the other electrons, which, attracted by the battery's positive terminal, follow suit and flow along the wire. An electric current is born. The electric current will last as long as the chemical reactions continue inside the battery. The greater the number of electrons flowing through the wire, the greater the intensity of the current. However, as they travel through the wire, electrons have a tendency to slow down. This slowdown, accompanied by an emission of heat, is more pronounced in some materials. This phenomenon, electric resistance, makes it possible to use electric current many ways. When the electrons reach the tungsten filament of an incandescent light bulb, part of their energy is converted into heat. Made white hot, the lamp's filament emits light. Similarly, an electric range's capacity to heat up is due to the resistance of its elements. Electric batteries constitute the oldest known means to generate an electric current. However, today, most of the electricity we use is obtained with a device that converts the energy of a movement into electric energy. That device is an alternator. Alternators work using an amazing property that electrons possess. As they flow through a wire, electrons generate an invisible magnetic field. When this field is brought close to another wire, the electrons in the second wire are also activated, creating a current in that wire. The alternators in major electric power stations consist of a mobile coil of wire, the rotor, in which a current flows. The rotor is housed inside a stationary coil of wire called the stator. A turbine pulled by water or steam spins the rotor. As it turns, the magnetic field made by the rotor generates a current in the stator. This close relationship between magnetism and electricity is also what makes an electric motor, a bicycle's dynamo, or a car's alternator function. It's safe to say that all modern society was built thanks to the harnessing of the unique properties of a tiny particle, the electron. In recent years, we have been focusing on finding new and more cost-effective sources of energy. In Italy, for instance, electricity is produced from vapors that burst forth from the depths of the earth. Around the world, there is growing interest in wind energy, solar energy, tidal energy. Even though we cannot predict what sources of energy we will be relying on in the future, there is one that already stands out, and that is nuclear energy. Today's nuclear power stations use atom fission, but increasingly scientists are looking to nuclear fusion, that is the union of atomic nuclei which would produce even greater energy. The oceans are filled with deuterium, an atom of heavy hydrogen, which lends itself remarkably well to fusion and could meet our energy needs for 1 billion years. But controlled nuclear fusion is a process we are still a long way from mastering. In the meantime, however, water provides another fuel which is already being greatly used: hydrogen. The immense water reservoirs of the globe hold a source of energy that could become one of the most important in the future: hydrogen. Hydrogen is the lightest and most abundant of the 100-odd chemical elements in nature. It makes up 90% of the universe's mass. It is the main component of stars and the sun. On Earth, this colorless, odorless gas usually exists in combination with other elements. Hydrogen is a component of petroleum and of many types of rocks, as well as all organic compounds elemental to life, such as sugars, proteins, and fats. When hydrogen is exposed to a flame in the presence of oxygen, it burns vigorously, sometimes explosively, producing water. During this reaction, 2 atoms of hydrogen combine with 1 atom of oxygen to form a molecule of water. The combustion yields no pollution, and the amount of energy emitted is much greater than gas combustion. For this reason, hydrogen is a most promising energy source. Several methods have been developed to obtain hydrogen. The most successful employs 2 resources that are virtually inexhaustible: water and electricity. The process, called electrolysis, is done by means of electrolytic cells. The cells consist of electrodes in a salt solution. A strong electric current is sent between the 2 electrodes. The current causes the water molecules to dissociate. Hydrogen forms on the negative electrode. Depending on the type of salt used, oxygen or chlorine is produced on the positive electrode. Every liter of water thus provides about 1,000 liters of gaseous hydrogen. Water vapor is then separated from the hydrogen produced. The hydrogen thus obtained can be forwarded to the areas of use by canalization. It can also be cooled to temperatures reaching -253 degrees Celsius. It then becomes liquid and is easily transportable. Hydrogen is used in the chemical industry, for example, in the preparation of fertilizers. It is also used in microelectronics and even to make margarine. But hydrogen, especially liquid hydrogen, is expected to become an ideal fuel for various types of vehicles. A hydrogen engine only requires a few minor alterations to a conventional gas engine. Its major advantage is that it does not emit toxic gases into the atmosphere. Obtained from electricity and water, hydrogen can also be reconverted back into water and electricity by means of a combustible battery. In such a battery, hydrogen and oxygen are combined by a catalyzer and produce vapor and an electric current. The battery, the power of which is 40 kilowatts, would be sufficient to satisfy the energy needs of 3 houses, even in winter. Companies that produce electricity are considering developing large-scale combustion batteries in order to serve remote areas. One of hydrogen's most common applications is as fuel for rockets. Energy-rich, manageable, and extremely lightweight, hydrogen fuels the engines of a great many rockets. The American Space Shuttle's booster rocket, for example, is hydrogen-propelled. The development of these technologies, like all new energies, is limited by the low cost of alternative fuel, oil. Sooner or later, however, crude oil reserves will be depleted and have to be replaced by other sources of energy, such as hydrogen. When Einstein announced his famous E=mc² formula to the scientific world, he hadn't been in a laboratory for years. He had arrived at this equation by a series of logical and mathematical calculations. He was deeply convinced that the world was fundamentally comprehensible.